Adventures in Colonial America by James E. Knight. Jamestown, A New World Adventure. So James E. Knight was the author of this book. And this book belongs to Miss Dee Dee. You can see that. Here's our title page. It says the same thing I just read, Jamestown, New World Adventure by James E. Knight, and illustrated. So we've talked about that before. What's the illustrator, or who is the illustrator? What does it mean if you've illustrated something? Have you illustrated your journal pages in your daily journal? Yes, you have been the illustrator. So illustrated means drawn the pictures. So David Wenzel drew these pictures. All right, let's begin. Here's another picture of them building the houses. That was obviously a picture of the ship. This is actually page 7. Now you can be coloring your coat of arms by Captain John Smith while I'm reading. The fire crackled and danced on the hearth. Julia Redfield looked at her son and daughter. They were seated on the floor, warming their feet before the flames. "Are you ready to hear the story of your grandfather's time in America?" she asked. They both nodded. "Is that Grandfather Worth's journal?" Benjamin asked. Oh, here's a picture of that. He even has a journal. So a journal can be a book that you record, kind of like a diary, day-to-day things that happen. Or you could have a journal for a trip. Or like we do, we have a journal for our history sentences and our pictures. We have our Bible journal. We record our verses in that. And then you have your creative journal, your daily journal, where you draw a picture and write a story. All right. I'm back to this spot. "Yes, I've saved it for a long time. Now you are both old enough to understand what it says. Father told me that the Indians burned down the Jamestown settlement 2 years ago," Lydia said. "I know," said her mother. "Times have been hard for the little colony in the Virginia wilderness, but it was even worse in your grandfather's time." "Read to us, Mother," Benjamin said. "I want to hear what happened." Julia Redfield opened the worn and yellowed pages of the journal. She began to read. Now, his journal entry basically has the date. So it was May 14th, 1607. Wow, that's a long time ago. And this is a true story. This really happened. That's why it's called history. Our year, the year we are in now, is 2020. So can you guess about how long ago this was? Ooh. We could do the math and figure it out. So 2020, my first graders minus 1,607. Can you do it? That is a long time ago. All right, let's begin to read. Here's the picture I'll show you of the ship while I'm reading the story. This journal will record the adventures of Israel Worth in the new colony of Jamestown. At the time of this first entry, I am 28 years old and in good health. I am one of 4 master carpenters on this expedition. As I write, I am aboard the ship Suzanne Constant with Captain Christopher Newport in command. 2 other ships are also anchored in this pleasant bay. They are the Godspeed and the Discovery. I will write as often as I am able, for I know that we will all be laboring hard for this new colony of the Virginia Company, and time will be scarce. How sweet the land smells after our long voyage. From the ship I can see a white sandy beach and tall pines. The air is mild. The river beyond this bay looks broader than any I have seen in England. As with our colony, the rivers have been named James after our king. So he started the entry when they set sail, it seems like. And Oh, excuse me. No. He started the entry when he was still aboard the ship, and then he was getting off the ship, not when they set sail. So they've already sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. And we're kind of backtracking here because this story is the story of Jamestown. Remember when we learned about Pocahontas and we read all about her? This was happening in the story of Pocahontas, but we were focusing on Pocahontas, not on Captain John Smith and the story of Jamestown. So now we're kind of taking a little picture or taking the opportunity to learn about what happened. It's like a flashback or I don't know, it's a segment inside of the story of Pocahontas. When we entered the Chesapeake Bay a few days back, there was trouble. We were anchored off a point of land, which the captain called Cape Henry. He and some of our men went to shore. They were attacked by Indians. 2 sailors were wounded by arrows, and one of them died today. Earlier today, we carried men and goods to shore. Some of the men are now asleep in canvas shelters in the forest. I will go ashore tomorrow. When we arrived in this wilderness, Captain Newport opened a sealed box he had brought from the Virginia Company in England. It contained the names of the 7 men who will be our counselors or leaders here. One of the names was that of Captain John Smith. I, for one, was surprised by this choice. Captain Smith had been under arrest for some time on the voyage over. I know not why. The other leaders do not seem to like him, but he was taken to the counselor's oath of office along with the rest. But he has taken the counselor's oath of office along with the rest. Wonder what happened to John Smith on the voyage over. Why they had to, or felt like they had to put him under arrest. That's a little strange, isn't it? This says June 7th. And here's some pictures of some weapons I'm sure it will tell us about in the story. For 3 weeks now, I have been ashore. We are clearing the land. From dawn to dusk, we labor at cutting down trees. Despite our earlier troubles with the Indians, things have been going smoothly between us. We have seen them several times, and they have given us corn. But yesterday, while some of our leaders were out exploring, trouble began. Some 200 warriors attacked with spears and arrows. Many of us were wounded, and one boy was killed. We drove the Indians back with musket fire. That's their muskets. Of course, the men on the ship and the people from England, Captain John Smith, they had guns, but obviously the Indians did not. We drove the Indians back with musket fire. They seemed terrified of it. This has taught us a hard lesson. We must build a fort to protect ourselves. We will call it James Fort, and it will face the river. As a carpenter, I will be busy with this for some time. The fort will be made of upright logs, and it will be shaped like a triangle. Other buildings will be added later. Bulwarks will be erected at each corner of the fort. From these high towers, we will set up our artillery. Sorry, I have to drop it. So you can see all of the musket, the matlock musket, and here's the powder horn that they had to keep the powder, which is gunpowder, and they had little balls that they would put inside the musket and then put the powder, and it was in a horn with a little spout that the powder could be poured into the musket, and they would pack it down with a stick, basically. You could watch a video online about how to load a musket and how it was shot. My brother has a musket, and it's super heavy. I can hardly hold it. It's very, very long, too. His is about almost 6 feet long. And then you lock the flint, and then you have to light it with like a match, and then you fire it. And out of the barrel of the gun comes the ball. It shoots out with a lot of force because of that gunpowder that you put into into the gun. And basically the little ball explodes out, and it can do a lot of damage to anyone it hits or anything it hits. So these are obviously some of the weapons of the Indians: the war club, the Indian bow, the arrow, and it says a reed quiver. So a quiver is something that you hold all of your arrows inside of. Okay, let's keep going and find out what happens. Oh, they begin to build the fort. On June 23rd, it says, "We have worked hard these past weeks in warm temperatures. We must try to settle this colony as soon as possible for the Virginia Company. Yesterday, Captain Newport sailed for England on the Susan Constant. The Godspeed sailed too. Now we are but 100 souls alone in this foreign shore. Yet we are too busy to be lonely or afraid. James Fort is nearly finished, and it is very handsome. I am proud of having built the west bulwark with my own hands." So remember what a bulwark was? It was the corner piece that made a tower that they could get up in and stand and look out over the logs of the fort. Who else built a fort that we began the year reading about? Very similar to this. Took him a long time. He was working by himself. That's right. Robinson Crusoe. "We have planted a wheat field beside the fort. As a carpenter, I have much to do here. I have helped build our chapel too, and other buildings." "Grandfather Worth must have been very skilled," said Lydia. "Indeed he was," said her mother, "as were many of the others on the expedition. But not all of them, unfortunately. Your grandfather records that some of them were gentlemen. They would not work with their hands. While your grandfather and the others worked, they sat about or went off in search of gold." I bet that didn't make the workers feel very happy. But I have a feeling Captain John Smith wasn't quite like that, even though he was considered a gentleman. Here's someone, probably a gentleman in his outfit, not working, overseeing the work perhaps, and the other men working hard. Here are pictures of the tools, the carpentry tools that this man was using, that they had to use. They had no power drills or power saws. Everything was done by hand. At least they had tools, unlike Robinson Crusoe, who had none and had to make them himself. Before I keep going, let's take a look at how you're doing on your coloring page. Here's the coat of arms that you have. We're going to write a sentence here in a minute. And here's your coloring page, or a copy that you can look at to get a good idea of how some of the colors used in John Smith's coat of arms. So as I was saying, this would have been on a banner hanging in John Smith's home. It would have been on some of maybe the blankets or the drapes, or certainly even on some of his uniforms, or on his shield, on some of his armor. So you can look up more information about coats of arms, but I wanted to show you this picture for you to get an idea of some of the colors to use. You can totally use your own colors however you want to do it. You do not have to color it the way this picture shows, as we normally do. We'll talk about some of these elements, the bird, the words in Latin, but right now you just keep coloring. I'm going to read a little bit more. Remember, we were just reading about some of the gentlemen didn't work. "Why didn't the others make the gentlemen work?" Lydia asked. "I don't know," her mother said. "However, your grandfather writes that Captain Wingfield, who was elected the council president for a year, did nothing about it. Captain John Smith thought this was foolhardy. He said the colony could not survive without storing food for winter and building shelters. Captain Smith believed the men should not be wasting time looking for gold, even if that is what the Virginia Company wanted. Now, something I didn't explain to you, or this book hasn't explained yet, is the Virginia Company was a company in England who gave money, who paid for this expedition. So they paid for the ships, they gave the men, they were paying the men, they gave them food to supply the supplies on their ships. And they are the ones that are sending them to the New World to build the colony of Jamestown. Okay, here's our story picks up. What happened next? Asked Benjamin. Mrs. Redfield began reading again. July 5th. Suddenly, disease had struck our colony. 10 days ago, we were in good health. Now men take to their beds, shaking with fever. They die of what we often do not know. We bury them secretly at night. We are afraid that the Indians will learn how few we are. Captain Smith was not surprised by the disease. He says that we should have dug freshwater wells. Instead, we have been drinking from the bay at low tide when the water is least salty. The captain says this disease is caused by hot weather, hard work, and bad diet. How strange that our food supply should be low. We are on half rations now. Half rations mean you only get half of the amount of food you're normally rationed for the day. A ration is, say your mother and father or your mom made a certain amount of food for the day, for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you, each of your family members get, say, for breakfast you get one muffin, for lunch you get one sandwich, and for dinner you get a piece of chicken and peas. Of course, everyone loves peas, right? Well, half rations would be if in the morning, if you got half the muffin, and at lunch you got half the peanut butter sandwich, and at dinner you got half the piece of chicken and half the amount of peas. Well, they had cut down their food supplies by half, and yet they were getting sick, as Captain Smith said. This disease was caused by hot weather, hard work, and bad diet, and probably especially poor water. That's why we need to drink plenty of good water and to keep ourselves well. Yet this land is not without plenty. Birds and fur-bearing animals fill the forests. Raccoons grow as large as foxes. Crabs, mussels, oysters, and fish are plentiful, but we do not have the skills of the Indians. We cannot catch enough fish or hunt enough animals to feed ourselves. The wheat we planted does not grow well. Our English meat and our biscuits are gone. We sometimes barter with the Indians for corn, but it is not enough. We eat the barley and wheat that is left from our voyage. They are wormy from weeks at sea. Oh, yuck. Poor Jamestown settlers. Poor men, they're getting hungry. Despite our misery, the gentlemen still go forth on their gold-seeking parties. I agree with Captain Smith. What foolishness this is. Let's see. I'm going to read about half of it to you right now. And then I'll finish it, and you can finish listening another day. September 5th. Half our number, over 50 souls, are dead and buried. Sadness and fear have taken over the colony. One of our 7 counselors is dead, too. Other men have been killed by the arrows of unfriendly Indians. One man was executed for speaking treason against the crown. But most have died of disease and starvation. I go to my bed hungry each night. Tonight I have a few kernels of corn in my stomach, and I am so lucky. I will probably awake in the morning. Basically, he's saying, I guess I won't die tonight. October 13th. 3 of the gold seekers were killed yesterday by the Indians of the Pamunkey Nation. They are part of the much-feared chiefdom of King Powhatan. Do we know his name? King Powhatan? Yes, you remember, it's Pocahontas' father. I think we're getting to the part, hopefully, that we know about when she saves John Smith. Our canvas tents are rotting away. Now we are building cabins with thatched roofs supported on posts. The walls are woven with hazel or willow branches and then plastered with mud. We have learned from the Indian wigwams. We leave a hole in the roof through which smoke can escape. They built it with a chimney, but the Indian wigwams just had a hole. It was hard for the Englishmen to quickly adopt Indian ways. They eventually get better. How did they ever get through the winter? Benjamin asked. Father says it grows very cold in Virginia. Yes, said his mother. The colony suffered from frostbite and illness, and there was so little to eat. Everyone began to see that Captain Wingfield was not fit to lead the colony. More and more your grandfather and others began to listen to Captain Smith. Then in December, your grandfather writes that Captain Smith and 9 other men left on an expedition to explore the Chickahominy River. What happened? Lydia asked. In the entry for December 24th, the captain had still not returned, but a friendly Indian told the colonists that Smith had been taken prisoner. Our story overlaps with our Pocahontas, finally. Was that true? Asked Benjamin. Let me read what is written here, replied his mother. January 1st, 1608. Praised be, the captain is returned with the new year. He was indeed a prisoner of Chief Powhatan, but he was treated well, and now he speaks of a new time of peace and friendliness with the Indians. But the other counselors are jealous of this man. Now they talk of hanging him because 2 men were killed on the expedition. Well, it's a few days later, January 4th. All talk of hanging has been forgotten. Our old ship, the Susan Constant, has returned from England. It sailed into the bay 2 days ago with 100 new settlers and supplies. How happy we were to see them. Along with the supplies, there was eagerly awaited mail. I received a long letter from my dear wife with news of our young daughter. There was great merrymaking in Jamestown on that day. You must have been very young then, Mother, said Lydia. Mrs. Redfield smiled. Young indeed. But my poor father. No sooner had he received news from home than tragedy struck again. His entry from January 7th records a fire in the fort. Many of the cabins were burned. Old and new settlers were greatly discouraged. There was talk of going home, but once again the Indians helped them. Listen. February 28th. Much has happened. We shall not leave Jamestown after all. Captain Smith's new friends among Powhatan's people have saved us. They come out of the forest often now. They bring fish, bread, corn, turkeys, and raccoons. Without them, we would never survive. Oh, you remember in Pocahontas, she and her friends first brought supplies to Captain Smith, and they certainly wouldn't have made it through the winter. Oh, here it is in the Englishman's version. A young Indian maiden often leads the food bearers. She is Pocahontas, daughter of King Powhatan and a princess in this land. I cannot but think she is only 11 or 12 years of age, but she has shown herself to be a true friend. Didn't Pocahontas come to London a few years after that? Benjamin asked. Yes, said his mother. She married an Englishman, John Rolfe, and they visited London in 1616. She was presented to the court, and everyone was charmed by her. But sadly, she died of smallpox while still in England. But listen, your grandfather writes more of her. I'm going to read a little bit more and then stop for today and show you what to write. April 20th. Pocahontas comes almost every other day. She and other Indian friends bring food to us, and she carries messages back and forth between her father and Captain Smith. More and more, many of us feel that the captain should be our leader. 10 days ago, the Susan Constant sailed again for England, and today the Phoenix sailed into our bay. Once again, we have more settlers. This will be our last part. May 14th. Jamestown is 1 year old today. Let me read that again. It has an exclamation point at the end of the sentence. Jamestown is 1 year old today. It is longer than that since I have seen my home and family. My old friend Angus Murchison and I are sad. We are among the few old men in this place. There are but 38 of us left from the original 100. There has been Indian trouble once more. They have taken tools, spades, hatchets, and other things. Captain Smith was greatly angered, and he took several Indians as hostages. But once more, Pocahontas saved us. She arrived with presents and food from Powhatan, her father. He sent his word that his people will give us no more trouble. I'm going to stop right there. We'll pick up June 2nd at another time. But I want to show you what you're going to write on your page today. It's going to be a simple sentence, and it says, let me write it for you. If I can do it here while I'm holding my camera. I'm going to put my books underneath. Capital J for John. We're going to write John, John. Capital S for Smith because that's his name and it's a proper noun. John Smith. An apostrophe S, John Smith's. It belongs to him. Coat, and I'm going to put a capital because we're titling it Coat of Arms. Capital A-R-M-S. This isn't exactly a sentence. It's more like a phrase because it doesn't have an action in it. It doesn't have a verb. But we're just making this phrase. John Smith's coat of arms. Moms, you can write that for your student. You can push pause on this video and they can copy it. Or if you write it for your student, they can trace over it. Okay, I'll see you again with our history journal at a later time. Bye.